The semi-truck screeched to a halt under the harsh glow of FBI spotlights. Agents moved in fast, rifles raised. But when they opened the cargo doors, it wasn't just drugs inside. Crammed behind a false steel wall were terrified men, shivering, bruised, and locked in cages. One man whispered, "They were going to bury us in the desert tonight." The call came in just after midnight. Route 52, 5 miles north of the border, had gone quiet. Too quiet. That's when Agent Jason Kroll, 12 years deep into narcotics and trafficking cases, knew something was coming. A white Kenworth semi had been flagged by aerial surveillance. No plates. No heat signatures in the back. The driver had bypassed two-way stations and was cruising toward a desert bypass used in past smuggling runs. Suspicious, but routine until chatter picked up. Cartel radio codes matched a known syndicate, Los Dientes. Ruthless. No, not just for drugs, but for moving people like cargo. The FBI set up fast. They didn't wait for backup. 4 black SUVs boxed in the truck as it slowed at a remote checkpoint. Border Patrol agents flanked the sides. Kroll approached the cab with his Glock raised, calm but ready. The driver didn't flinch. No panic. No fear. That's what made it worse. The man had no ID, no phone. Spoke fluent English. Claimed he was hauling scrap metal. The manifest looked forged. Kroll opened the trailer. Inside was darkness and silence. There were boxes, yes, but nothing stacked like narcotics. The floor was freshly welded, uneven. Kroll signaled for a thermal scope. The floor glowed faint orange. Heat from inside, but nothing on the main scan. He called in a crowbar and backup. 2 agents peeled back a steel plate bolted into the floor. A hinge groaned. Then the smell hit them, sweat, rust, blood. Beneath the panel was a hidden compartment, 4 feet high, 8 feet long. Inside were 12 men, shirtless, beaten, faces swollen. Each one bore a number tattooed on the forearm. A few were unconscious. One was convulsing. Another had bruises that looked recent, hours old. Kroll stepped back. "Get medics." Now. The driver made his move then. Bolted from the cab. Ran for the ditch. One agent gave chase, but it was Kroll who cut him off near the barbed wire. A hard tackle into gravel. The man hissed something in Spanish before spitting blood on Kroll's vest. "You don't even know what you just opened," he said. "They're just one shipment." The words chilled everyone. Border medics arrived. The survivors were pulled from the hidden bay, one by one, too weak to stand. One of them, barely able to speak, grabbed Kroll's wrist. "They were taking us somewhere," he murmured. "Said the desert. Said we wouldn't make it past tonight." Kroll looked around. No phones. No IDs. Only numbers on flesh and scars from restraints. He had seen drug smuggling, weapons, money laundering. But this was systematic. Clean. Professional. Hidden under the illusion of a typical cartel haul. He turned back to the trailer. Something was wrong with the walls. One side was thicker than the other. He knocked hollow. He called for a plasma saw. Within minutes, agents had cut open the false wall. Behind it, hidden behind insulated panels, were brick-wrapped narcotics. Not just cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, and something else, a sealed freezer box. Inside, a row of syringes and surgical gloves. Someone had been preparing these men for something far worse. Kroll's radio crackled. A tech had found a small GPS tracker welded into the axle housing. The destination wasn't even in the U.S. It was pinging coordinates in the middle of the Sonoran Desert off-grid. The truck wasn't just smuggling drugs or people. It was part of a pipeline. And this bust? It was only the beginning. The desert air pressed heavy over the FBI staging site as the trafficked men were airlifted out. Jason Kroll didn't speak much during the transport. He stared at the numbers tattooed on the men's forearms, small, crude digits, each accompanied by a vertical slash. Someone had been counting. One of the men, conscious but barely responsive, kept repeating 2 words in Spanish, "El número, el número." Back at the field office, analysts cleaned up the truck. The GPS tracker was real, welded into the chassis, camouflaged beneath road grime. Its last known destination was an unmarked point in the desert, 2 hours west of El Torado, deep in unpatrolled territory. The coordinates were traced to a forgotten way station from the 80s, long shut down after the route lost traffic. The team didn't wait. Kroll and his partner, Agent Marcus Tate, suited up with 6 others and drove out in 2 armored Suburbans. The heat was merciless. When they reached the abandoned station, it was exactly what they feared: emptiness with signs of recent life. Inside the cracked cinder block office was a dusty desk with a metal drawer welded shut. Marcus used a crowbar to rip it loose. Inside was a burner phone, turned off, and a small pouch containing surgical gloves and gauze. No documents. No IDs. But next to it, jammed behind a loose wall panel, was a gray nylon bag stuffed with zip ties, latex masks, and a folded note in Spanish. Next group, 14 units. Keep cold. No delays. Units. Not people. Units. They didn't say it aloud, but the truth hung in the air. Organ transport. As Kroll scanned the room, the burner phone lit up in his hand. An incoming call. The number was scrambled. The agents froze. Kroll answered. Silence. Then a voice distorted. You're late. The line disconnected. The agents swept the surrounding area and found fresh tire tracks behind the station leading toward the canyons. Drag marks in the sand. Burned paper near a rusted oil drum. The documents had been shredded and burned, but fragments showed diagrams of human anatomy, color-coded with prices. They had stumbled onto something worse than a smuggling operation. This was organized, funded, and clean. No digital trails. No names, just product. Back at the truck impound, forensics found something unusual embedded in the trailer wall insulation, a sliver of carbon fiber with laser-etched coating. It matched an ID system used by a tech company specializing in warehouse logistics. The company's name was Intex Systems, based out of El Paso, formerly contracted for inventory control in shipping yards. It was supposed to be defunct. Intex's last known CEO? Edgar Moreno. The name rang a bell. He had been investigated by federal auditors 4 years ago for money laundering, but the case had vanished after an internal witness recanted. Kroll had a gut feeling. Moreno hadn't disappeared. He'd gone underground and found something more profitable than running cash, selling people piece by piece. That night, Kroll returned to the hospital where the rescued men were being treated. Most were sedated, unresponsive, deeply dehydrated. But one man had regained enough strength to speak. He was Venezuelan, early 30s, said his name was Rodrigo. Rodrigo didn't know the others. He said he was promised work in Texas. A man met him at the border and offered a ride. But when Rodrigo woke up, he was already inside the truck. Days passed. No food, little water. He remembered one thing: a man with black gloves checking their pulses, murmuring numbers under his breath, like they were livestock. Rodrigo broke down halfway through. Kroll sat in silence, jaw tight, as the truth settled deeper into his bones. This wasn't just cartel work. This was something engineered. When Kroll returned to the bureau, he found Marcus staring at a screen. The GPS on the burner phone had pinged once more, only for 7 seconds. A new location. Coordinates locked onto a large, camouflaged building just off a washed-out desert road. Aerial footage showed tarp-covered fencing, trucks coming in and out every 3 days. Kroll leaned in. There are no official records for that structure. No tax ID. No registration. Only dust. And silence. They were going in. The air was still when the convoy reached the edge of the canyon. The GPS ping had gone silent again, but the signal was enough to guide the team. The desert sun hadn't yet risen. The landscape was all shadow and dust. In front of them, half buried in sand and shielded by brown camouflage netting, sat a warehouse with no markings, no signs, and no fences. Just silence. No guards posted. No lights. But there were tracks, fresh tire marks, and footprints leading to a back entrance. Kroll signaled the team to move in, rifles up. The closer they got, the more they smelled it: disinfectant, motor oil, and something else. Like copper. Inside, the warehouse stretched wide with steel pillars and a high ceiling. The entire space had been divided into sections with movable metal walls. They found 3 enclosed rooms. The first one had 4 blood-stained cots. Restraints hung from the legs. The mattresses were thin and covered in surgical paper. Empty 4 bags hung from hooks. Kroll moved to the second room and froze. 2 men were inside, barely conscious. One of them was muttering in a hoarse whisper. The other didn't move. They were chained to the floor, wrists raw. Nearby sat a medical cooler, still plugged into a generator. Inside were vials of blood and pre-labeled syringes. This wasn't just holding. This was pre-operation. Marcus called for evac while agents began cutting the chains. Kroll scanned the room and noticed something strange on the wall. Rows of hooks with hanging jumpsuits. Each one had a number on the chest, matching the tattoos they'd seen on the truck victims. This was where the tagging happened. Suddenly, a loud snap echoed through the building. A pressure-triggered tripwire. Too late to stop it. The rear of the warehouse erupted in fire and smoke. Dust blew through the building as the back wall collapsed inward. A tunnel. Kroll coughed through the haze and gave chase, spotting two shadows bolting through the opening. He followed them into the darkness, his sidearm raised. The tunnel was narrow and steep, lit only by emergency strobes. After 50 yards, a figure turned and struck. The punch hit Kroll's temple, sending stars across his vision. The next blow sent him to the ground. His pistol skidded into the dark. Boots scraped against gravel. Then nothing. He woke with blood in his mouth and iron around his wrist. His vision cleared slowly. Across from him sat a man in tactical black, face covered by a desert scarf. He stared silently at Kroll, then dropped something in front of him, badge. FBI. Not Kroll's. Someone else's. Kroll asked where the others were. The man didn't answer. Instead, he spoke clearly, his voice oddly calm. You think you've stopped something tonight. But this place isn't the operation. It's a link. There are 5 more. Bigger. Cleaner. Kroll strained against the chain. It didn't move. The man stood and walked toward the far end of the tunnel, where faint voices echoed in the distance. Before disappearing into the dark, he tossed something else onto the ground. A leather notebook. Kroll stretched and reached it with his foot, dragging it close. Inside, by the dim strobe, he saw pages lined with dates, initials, and numbers. Each name had a price next to it. Codes. Some marked with a red slash. Sold. Others marked with a circle. In transit. Then he saw it. 3 pages in a row. Dozens of entries under those initials. It wasn't just a notebook. It was a ledger. Footsteps returned, but this time they weren't from the masked man. Voices. Agents. Marcus burst through the tunnel entrance with 2 SWAT members, rifles raised. They cut the chain and pulled Kroll to his feet. No sign of the masked man. No sign of escape. But the notebook was real. So were the names. And one of them, at the very bottom, was someone they recognized. A senior logistics officer at a private border security firm. The operation was deeper than they imagined. Not just the cartel. It had help on this side, too. The tunnel was sealed within the hour. A drone sweep of the surrounding terrain revealed no sign of recent vehicle movement. Whoever orchestrated the escape had vanished into the canyon before sunrise. But they had left behind their most valuable asset, the ledger. Back at the field office, Kroll sat with his wrist bandaged, flipping through the worn leather notebook. It smelled faintly of engine grease and antiseptic. The pages were numbered by hand. Every line was coded, dates, dollar figures, and paired initials. Over 100 entries. One acronym appeared over and over again. Edgar Moreno. Once a respected executive in long-haul logistics, Moreno had gone off the grid after his company, in tech systems, filed for bankruptcy. Officially, he was cleared of any wrongdoing. Unofficially, the case had been buried. No witnesses. No files. No follow-up. Now his initials were tied to a transnational trafficking ring with confirmed connections to 2 dead victims and dozens of survivors. Kroll handed the ledger to Marcus. He's not funding this. He's running it. A few pages later, they found another clue, an address scribbled faintly in the margins next to a set of coordinates. It matched a property in northern New Mexico leased under a shell company. The name on the lease was unrelated, but financial records traced payments back to Moreno's former accountant. They sent a reconnaissance drone that afternoon. The property was a single-story structure on 80 acres of isolated land, surrounded by rusting farm equipment and overgrown brush. No visible guards. But 2 refrigerated trucks were parked behind the building. No plates. engines still warm. Kroll and Marcus didn't wait. By dusk, the FBI prepared a breach team. At 11:47 p.m., under the cover of a starless sky, 3 black SUVs approached the compound with lights off. Another team approached from the rear, silently scaling the low fence. Inside the building, there were no lights, just humming. They entered through the side door and swept quickly. The rooms were arranged like a medical outpost, metal tables, surgical trays, and cameras installed in the ceiling corners. A portable generator buzzed in the back, powering one large refrigeration unit. Inside the freezer were multiple coolers, some empty, others marked with labels Type B, Kidney, AB dash dot. They weren't just trafficking people. They were harvesting. A sudden bang broke the silence. One of the agents kicked down a locked steel door and found a man tied to a gurney, gagged and sedated. He was conscious, blinking slowly. His chest rose unevenly, like he hadn't slept in days. They cut him free. He wasn't the only one. Another room revealed a soundproof compartment lined with foam walls. 4 men sat on the floor, silent, too exhausted to react. None of them knew where they were. All had matching scars at the base of the spine, clean incisions. The scene was surgical, cold, clinical. Kroll moved through the back hallway and found a small office. Inside was a wall-mounted map of the U.S., peppered with red dots. A notebook sat open on the desk, half-filled. Another list. Another set of codes. Then he saw it. Tomorrow's date. A shipment marked Final Load. Destination El Sendero Airstrip. Departure 0400 hours. Kroll related to command. The agents had less than 5 hours. Marcus traced the airstrip. It was private, owned by a subsidiary linked to a Shell import-export company, again connected to Intex systems. The pieces aligned. Moreno had built a full supply chain, capturing, prepping, transporting, and selling, all under the radar, all through legal channels hiding illegal transactions. They finally had their link. But the clock was already ticking. Before leaving the compound, Kroll walked outside and looked at the trucks. One of them had a receipt stuck to the dash, a fuel order placed 20 minutes prior. Paid in cash. Pickup scheduled in 2 hours. Someone was still moving pieces. Moreno was still active. And whatever was happening at that airstrip was going to be the last stop. They had one chance left to intercept the final cargo before it disappeared forever. The sky over the desert was still dark when the FBI convoy rolled onto Route 52. The tires sliced through gravel as the agents loaded up in silence. Everyone knew this was the final shot. The shipment marked for extraction wasn't just another group of victims. It was the closing move in a coordinated human trafficking pipeline that stretched across borders, logistics firms, and medical supply chains. And Edgar Moreno was about to vanish with it. Aerial drones confirmed movement at the private airstrip. One large semi-truck had pulled onto the tarmac. A twin-engine cargo plane sat idle under hangar lights, its loading ramp down. The ground crew wore civilian clothes, but heat scans showed weapons under their vests. Kroll stared at the live drone feed. His jaw was tight. Moreno's silhouette stood near the truck, talking to a man with a clipboard. Time stamped, 3:41 hours. They were minutes from takeoff. The agents split into 3 strike units. One would block the road, one would approach the hangar from the west side, and the third, Kroll's team, would flank the truck. The order was clear. Take Moreno alive if possible. But stop the cargo. At all costs. The first shots rang out just before 4 a.m. Flashbangs tore through the dark as agents poured onto the runway. Gunfire cracked from behind fuel drums. The smugglers were armed and well-positioned, but not ready for a full federal assault. Kroll sprinted toward the truck, staying low, weapon drawn. One of the smugglers fired from behind the plane's landing gear. Marcus dropped him with a clean shot to the leg. As Kroll reached the truck, he yanked the cargo door open and froze. Inside the trailer were 8 men, chained to a steel frame. A bomb was mounted to the ceiling, rigged with a crude timer and motion sensor. The red light was blinking. He didn't wait. He climbed in, pulled the hatch shut behind him, and radioed the bomb squad. The captives stared at him with wide eyes. One man cried silently. The squad arrived within 2 minutes. Kroll held the frame steady while the techs disabled the motion trigger first. then cut the ignition wires. The bomb shut down with 7 seconds left. The team pried open the shackles. None of the men spoke English, but the relief on their faces needed no translation. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Bodies were on the ground. Moreno was gone. Marcus pointed toward the east fence. A black SUV was fleeing, headlights off, tires digging into the sand. Kroll jumped into the nearest bureau vehicle and gave chase. The pursuit cut through the desert for 7 miles. Kroll's vehicle slammed into the side of the SUV near a dried creek bed. Both vehicles spun. Kroll leapt out, gun drawn, and ran toward the wreck. Moreno was crawling from the driver's seat, dazed but alive. He reached under his coat. Kroll didn't wait. One clean shot to the shoulder dropped him. Backup arrived seconds later. Moreno was cuffed and dragged back to the airstrip under armed guard. Bleeding, he said nothing, just smiled through cracked teeth. "You think this stops it?" he muttered. "You don't even know who owns the pipeline." Kroll didn't respond. By sunrise, the rescued men were in federal care. The plane was impounded. The ledgers, bomb, and medical kits were documented. It would take weeks to track down every part of the operation, but the center of it was gone. Kroll stood on the edge of the tarmac as the wind picked up, carrying dust and smoke across the desert floor. 12 years in the Bureau, and he had never seen anything like this. It wasn't about drugs. It wasn't about power. It was about lives. That truck on Route 52 had been one of hundreds, and they'd only just cracked open the lid. But for now, 8 men who were supposed to disappear had survived, and that was worth every second of the chase.